Alright, thank God it's fantasy football season. I'm Buster Brown, and the show is Redemption Rehab. If you tuned in today, it's for one reason. It's to start winning championships in fantasy football. Today, we're talking about my top picks on the weekly waiver wire that'll help you get the job done. So let's head over to the weekly waiver wire report
and check out the facts.
Alright, here we are in week 11 of the NFL season. We're talking fantasy football. Hopefully you're doing well, but if you're not, that's okay, because we are here to help. We've got some great running backs, some great wide receivers and tight ends, and other position players to help you get the job done and get a win on your way to making the playoffs and eventually get a championship. That's what it's all about. So let's head over to the chalkboard
and check out the facts.
Here we are back on our website, fantasyfootballredemptionrehab.com. If you ever get a chance, come on, check out that site. As usual, we always start off with running backs on the waiver wire report. So what running backs do we like this week? Let's start out with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers running back Ronald Jones, who had 11 rushes for 29 yards and 1 TD. However, with 8 receptions for 77 yards on 8 targets is why we want to put Ronald Jones at the top of our list as running backs we want to get in week 11 of the NFL season. Let me give you some other running backs you should be considering this week, like the Atlanta Falcons running back Brian Hill, who had 20 rushes for 61 yards and 1 reception for 10 yards with 1 TD on 2 targets. Look, Devontae Freeman is no sure thing on any given week, and if you have him on your team, you should have already had Brian Hill as his handcuff once they put Ito Smith on IR. Let me give you some other guys who might help you this week, like the Detroit Lions running back J.D. McKissic. He had 10 rushes for 36 yards with 6 receptions for 19 yards on 7 targets. The Detroit Lions running game is not very good. Their offensive line seems to keep losing people, and they may be starting to get to the point where they're not a very good team. With Matthew Stafford being hurt, this is a deep flyer, deep sleeper. But if you're in need and you have to have a running back, I'm sure we've mentioned him 3 weeks in a row. It's our last week we're going to tell you about him. But if you get a chance, you might want to pick him up, especially if you have injuries or bye weeks and you have no choice. Let me give you a couple running backs and some sleepers that could help you in the future in week 11 of the NFL season, like the Cleveland Browns' Kareem Hunt. He's back from suspension. He rushed 4 times for 30 yards and had 7 receptions for 44 yards on 9 targets. Or how about the Miami Dolphins' Kalen Ballage, who rushed 20 times for 43 yards and had 4 receptions for only 2 yards on 4 targets. Hey, look, in most leagues, Kareem Hunt was drafted and they held on to him for 10 weeks. But maybe somebody cut him. He would have been a good pickup last week, but he's probably already gone in your league, but it's worth checking Kareem Hunt on the waiver wire. See if he's available in your league. It'd be a big boost to your team. Kalen Ballage, he's on a terrible team. He had 20 rushes, hardly got any yards. He's a deep sleeper, but they got to rush the ball somehow, and I'm not sure who else they have once they traded Kenyon Drake. Let me give you a sleeper that might help you this week in case of an injury to Saquon Barkley, and that is the New York Giants' Wayne Gallman, the handcuff to Saquon Barkley, who reportedly may have another injury from Week 10. Look, if Saquon Barkley goes down, this is the next man up. His name's Wayne Gallman. They lost a couple offensive linemen again this week, so it wouldn't surprise me a bit if they put Saquon Barkley on the bench because his injury has a chance to be a long-term thing. Let's head over and check out some wide receivers that can help you in Week 11 of the NFL season. Okay, here we are looking at wide receivers in Week 11 of the NFL season. Sometimes injuries to other starting players on teams, like what happened with the New York Giants when Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram went down, opens up spots for people we have mentioned for weeks now. And we've been telling you about this guy. His name is the New York Giants' Darius Slayton. He had 10 receptions for 121 yards and 2 TDs on 14 targets. The reason he got a chance to play is because of injuries. It's always good to listen on Sundays to see who's on the inactive list and who we may have mentioned that can help you win a game. He probably had close to 30 points in some PPR leagues, but we've been mentioning him for weeks. His name is Darius Slayton. He might be worth a flyer, especially if Sterling Shepard and Evan Ingram aren't playing next week. Let me give you some other wide receivers you should be looking at in Week 11, like the New York Jets' Demaryius Thomas, who had 6 receptions for 84 yards on 9 targets. The Jets only have so many people to throw the ball to. Jamison Crowder, who we've been mentioning most of the year, Le'Veon Bell, who probably got drafted, and both their tight ends. But the guy that seems to be getting the most targets on a weekly basis is Jamison Crowder and Demaryius Thomas. Take a chance and pick one of those guys up in Week 11. Let me give you some other wide receivers to keep an eye on this week, like the Dallas Cowboys veteran wide receiver Randall Cobb, who had 6 receptions for 106 yards with 1 TD on 6 targets. Randall Cobb is a veteran wide receiver. He used to play for the Green Bay Packers. He has these games every once in a while, but he might be worth a stash on your bench in case you have problems with injuries or bye weeks. Let me give you some sleepers to keep an eye on in the future, like the Chicago Bears wide receiver Taylor Gabriel, who had 4 receptions for 39 yards with 1 TD on 6 targets. Or how about the Pittsburgh Steelers' James Washington, who had 6 receptions for 99 yards with 1 TD on 7 targets. Here's a couple wide receivers that clearly are coming into their own because of injury or people got traded or cut. These are not bad players, and you should probably consider picking them up this week, especially if you have a bye week or an injury. And let me give you some other sleepers to help you in Week 10, like Arizona Cardinals' Danny Isabella, or the Green Bay Packers' Allen Lazard, or the Pittsburgh Steelers' Deontay Johnson, and how about the Rams' Josh Reynolds, who's substituted for Brandon Cooks, who's out with a concussion. All these wide receivers look good in the future. You never know who's going to step up. We mention these guys week after week. Hopefully you've picked up some of them, but if you didn't, now is as good a time as any. So let's go over and take a look at some tight ends that can help you in Week 11 of the NFL season. Okay, here we are back looking at tight ends for Week 11 of the NFL season on our website, fantasyfootballredemptionrehab.com. If you get a chance, go back and look at our strategies on drafting tight ends that we recorded before the season starts. Just go back and click on the arrow and take a peek, and we will have told you then that tight ends were going to be tough to find on the waiver wire once the season started. Well, here we are. If you're having trouble finding tight ends on the waiver wire, you should have watched that video. Tight ends we like this week, starting with the New Orleans Saints' Jared Cook. He had 6 receptions for 74 yards on 10 targets. He probably got drafted in your league, but a lot of people cut him. But guess what? Drew Brees likes to throw the tight end, and both of them are finally healthy. So look for Jared Cook to start getting more targets as the season progresses. Let me give you some other tight ends, like the Baltimore Ravens tight end Nick Boyle, who had 4 receptions for 78 yards on 4 targets. Nick Boyle has to compete with Mark Andrews, who's a premier tight end. But The quarterback, Lamar Jackson, has a tendency to run the ball or throw the ball to the tight ends. He likes to stretch the field to his deep wide receivers, but mostly he likes to target his tight ends. So Nick Boyle is a good tight end to maybe stash on your bench, especially if something happens to Mark Andrews. Let me give you another tight end we've talked about all year, and that is the Indianapolis Colts tight end Jack Doyle, who had 3 receptions for 44 yards with 1 TD on 4 targets. Since T.Y. Hilton went out, the Indianapolis Colts have had to rely on running the ball with their running backs, and because they have a good offensive line, and throwing the ball to their tight ends. It didn't help the fact that their quarterback went down. Now they're working with their 3rd string quarterback. So he's going to check it down to either the running backs, tight ends. And until T.Y. Hilton comes back and Jacoby Brissett, I think Jack Doyle and Eric Ebron are a safe bet. Let me give you some sleeper tight ends that might help you in the future, like the Minnesota Vikings tight ends Irv Smith and Kyle Rudolph. Both Minnesota tight ends, Irv Smith had 5 receptions for 34 yards and 6 targets. Kyle Rudolph had 4 receptions for 14 yards with 2 TDs on 6 targets. The Vikings are relying on their running backs and their tight ends with the injuries to Adam Thielen. Just like the Colts, they've had to just rely on their best available players. And once Adam Thielen comes back, probably not going to be throwing the ball to the tight ends as much, but they might help you next week. Let me give you some more sleepers that can help you at tight end in week 11, like the Miami Dolphins, Mike Gesicki, and the Denver Broncos, Noah Fant, who's coming back after a bye week. These are both young receivers who may have a game this week that you can remember. Then again, more likely than not, because they're rookies or second-year players, probably going to let you down. But if you have to have a tight end and you don't have any other choices, keep an eye out for Noah Fant this week and Mike Gesicki. Let me give you some quarterbacks that can help you in week 11 of the NFL season or in the future for your playoff run. Like the New York Giants quarterback Daniel Jones, who has a great playoff schedule. In week 10, he was 26 of 40 for 308 yards with a whopping 4 TDs, and he also had 3 rushes for 20 yards. Look, he had a rough matchup against the Jets. The Jets have a good defense, and they played a good game against the Giants, but he still threw for 4 TDs with a depleted wide receiving core. He's got a great schedule, weeks 14, 15, and 16. He might be worth adding to your bench for your playoff run. I would do it. Another quarterback I would consider adding to my bench for my playoff run, or in case I need one this week because of injury or bye week, and that's the New York Jets' Sam Darnold. He was 19 of 30, passing for 230 yards with 1 TD, and he rushed 3 times for 25 yards with another TD. Kid's a gamer. He was sick early in the year. They're starting to build a rapport with Demaryius Thomas and Jamison Crowder and Lev Bell and their tight ends. I think they could win some games. So if you need a quarterback this week or maybe one to stash on your bench for the playoffs, Sam Darnold's a good choice. Let me give you a few sleepers that might help you in case you need to stash a quarterback on your bench, or maybe you just need one to play for week 11, like the Oakland Raiders' Derek Carr. Or how about the Pittsburgh Steelers' Mason Rudolph? And let's not forget about the Miami Dolphins' Ryan Fitzpatrick, who has a great playoff schedules, weeks 14, 15, and 16. I suggest you check it out. He may be worth adding to your bench as a backup. I wouldn't play him against Buffalo this week, but I'll tell you what, his schedule gets easier, and if he stays healthy, he'd be a great fill-in in case your quarterback gets hurt, or maybe your quarterback in the playoffs just has an awful matchup. These are all things I do every year to win a championship. Let me give you some defenses that you should keep an eye on in week 11, like the Buffalo Bills versus the Miami Dolphins? Or how about the New York Jets versus the Washington Redskins? And a game I really like out in California is the Los Angeles Rams against the Chicago Bears. That's a long trip for the Bears to go out to LA. They played well last week in spurts. Trubisky has trouble against the pass rush. I think the Rams are really going to find themselves this week against the Bears, and they might be on your waiver wire. So check it out. And let me give you some kickers to keep an eye out for week 11 that were on bye last week. It's always a good chance to pick up a top 10 kicker when they're on bye like these two were. Starting with the Jacksonville Jaguars, Josh Lambo, or how about the Houston Texans, Kaimi Fairbairn, who were both on bye last week and are both top 10 kickers in the NFL. In summary, there you have it. It's week 11 in the NFL season. Season's getting close to the playoffs. So you need to get your lineups ready to win in week 11 and to make a push during the playoffs for a championship. I'm Buster Brown. The show's Redemption Rehab. Good luck.